118 years ago, a man who would go on to run for president from a prison cell said, "The cheapest commodity on earth today is human flesh and blood. To make a profit at the expense of human life is the central controlling motive of the capitalist system." Today, over a century later, that statement has never rung more true. We now live in a time of consensus. America is the greatest nation on earth. We've reached the end of history. Capitalism has been vindicated as the sole successful economic model. But deep down, most of us know that's not true. The average American life has changed dramatically in the past 30 or 40 years. In 1987, the average American could expect to be able to pay for the entirety of their 4-year college education on a minimum wage part-time salary. According to one study, the average combined cost of tuition, room, and board across 2,312 public and private universities in the U.S. was $39,643, adjusted for inflation. Let's do some math. All of these numbers will be adjusted for inflation. We'll take a fairly affordable school, say the University of Central Florida. The 4-year price for this particular school in 1987 was $33,100. The minimum wage in 1987 was $7.19. If a student worked 20 hours per week and put all of that money towards paying for their education, they could cover 106.5% of the cost and graduate with zero student debt. Fast forward to 2016 and the numbers look very different. The minimum wage is almost exactly the same, $7.25 versus $7.19. But over the 30 years, the cost of a 4-year degree from the University of Central Florida rose to $61,872. That's an increase of 87%. A student working 20 hours per week at minimum wage in 2016 could only cover 68.2% of the cost, and would graduate with almost $20,000 in student debt. And these numbers are for a relatively affordable school. What happens when we pick a more expensive school? Let's look at Samford University, a little private school in Birmingham, Alabama. In 1987, a 4-year degree from Samford cost $56,519. A student making minimum wage in 1987 would only be able to cover 62.4% of the total cost, and would graduate with $21,280 in student debt. Fast forward to 2016, and the price of a 4-year degree from Samford had jumped to $160,660. That's an increase of 184%. A student working part-time in 2016 could only cover 26.3% of the cost of their education, leaving them with $118,436 in student debt. Now, in this case, both students graduate with loans to pay off. Let's do the math on those. The average salary for an early career college-educated worker was $49,406 in 1987 and $50,556 in 2016. Side note, I and all of my friends would have loved to find a $50,000 job right out of school, but I digress. Let's assume both students set aside 10% of their salary each year to pay towards their debt, and their salary increases by 3% annually. The student in 1987 would be able to pay off their loans in 5 years, 3 months. The student in 2016 will likely never be able to pay off their loan unless their salary increases dramatically, because the interest owed would outpace monthly payments. The disparity is even more dramatic if we go back further. In 1968, the minimum wage was $1.60. Adjusted for inflation, that's $11.76. The bottom line is that while cost of everything from education, to housing, to groceries and prescription drugs have all skyrocketed, the wages of workers have remained the same or gotten worse. Today, the younger generations live lives defined by precarity. Millennials graduated from school with mountains of debt, entered a workforce that wasn't hiring or wasn't offering full-time or benefits. Many jumped on new solutions like gig economy jobs, driving for Uber or Lyft, delivering for any number of delivery companies, or turning to freelance work to pay the bills and hoping for a steady job to become available. That 9-to-5 job that our parents hated has become a dream for many young workers, and one that seems increasingly unattainable as businesses outsource to increase profits and keep workers just under full-time so they don't have to provide benefits like health insurance. These factors have combined to create an entire generation of young people who live paycheck to paycheck and are routinely mocked by older folks who don't realize just how much has changed over the last few decades. Nor do they seem to realize that the oldest millennials are now 40 years old, and we're about to see a whole new generation enter this rigged economy. The defining moments of the average millennial's life have been 9/11, the financial crash of 2008, and now the coronavirus economic crisis. We've seen none of the promised land that our parents remember, and yet people always say the economy is doing great, and we see those at the very top add billions to their net worth every year. And now, with the world's largest and wealthiest superpower on the brink of collapse, it's unsurprising that people are beginning to ask why this is happening.